There's studios that have been bought out by major tech companies because they realize that these studios have patents that will benefit them in one way or another, particularly when it comes to like AI and image recognition software, things like that.
I didn't even think of that. The technology, image recognition software, and all the stuff that people develop. So many tools for each movie that are unique. Yeah, there's a great documentary series on Disney, right, where they talk about ILM and they talk about every single movie, new development, new technology, new innovation, new software like Photoshop. Thanks to ILM, we have Photoshop, which is used by so many different industries and different artists. And they also came up with Avid, and I forget what other software they created.
Hmm.
Yeah, everyone uses and everyone takes for granted, but ILM
Yeah.
made that stuff for us.
Yeah, and like DreamWorks created the image compression software that pretty much every studio uses nowadays, which is DWAA compression, literally DreamWorks Animation A compression for EXRs.
Always wonder what that's for.
Yeah, it stands for DreamWorks. But yeah, it's basically something that'll take a very high resolution, high fidelity image and compress it down to the size of a JPEG, which is generally a really compressed image. Even Arnold, that was or RenderMan, different rendering software, which again, for listeners that don't know as much, when you do work in the software that we work in, regardless of what one it is, there's always the process of working in the project file. That's where you set up everything and you can kind of get an idea of what it's going to look like in the end. But once you have everything set up, then you have to render that out. So rendering is basically taking that project file and converting that into an image sequence. So 30 images for every second of footage or so, sometimes 24, sometimes 60, but about 30 images for every second of footage that you have to render out. And it takes all of that project file information and compresses it down to that one individual image. Um, and so with RenderMan and Arnold, those are two render software that would take lighting information in a way that had never been done before and kind of compress it into CGI models in a way that was a million times faster than all of the other rendering engines that were out at that point in time. Also integrating in GPU accelerated tools. CPU is kind of like the computer processing power of your machine. GPU is the graphics processing power of your machine. So GPU, whatever graphics card you have, that's going to determine how strong your GPU is. CPU is like your motherboard. It's how much processing info, like how many cores you have, that type of thing. So up until that point, all rendering was done on CPU, or pretty much all rendering was done on CPU, and then got converted to GPU accelerated things, and things went so much faster. That was basically the invention of cryptocurrencies because cryptocurrencies before GPU accelerated tools were a thing, they never ever could have been able to process the amount of information that they needed to process using CPU. So like that's the explosion of cryptocurrencies, that's the explosion of AI, that's the explosion of all these things is facilitated by GPU accelerated tools. So once that started to get created by these VFX studios like ILM and DreamWorks, and now that's changing the way the entire world lives because of advancements that were made in the film industry. And it's amazing. It's amazing to think of the technology that's been created and is being licensed out to major tech companies by visual effects studios. Like because tech companies,
Mm.
they're not going to come up with this kind of thing on their own. Like they're more focused on solving individual problems as quickly as they need to know how to, but they don't understand when you have a render where each individual frame takes 24 hours, you have to speed that up when you have a project that needs to be rendered out in 2 months' time. You it needs to go much, much faster than that. So that's why these studios created this software, because they needed things to render out really, really fast. And so that's one of the things I'm worried about with, well, no, we're not getting into AI at this point. But yeah, no, there's a lot of technological developments by these studios.